In my sleepy little New England town, life moved slower than molasses in January. It was the kind of place folks zipped through on Route 9, barely glancing at the faded gas station, the greasy Spoon Diner with its flickering neon sign, or the two rusty stoplights that blinked like tired eyes. If you craved adventure, you had to scrape it together from the scraps of nothing. My folks weren't much for letting me roam wild. They'd uprooted from the bustling streets of Boston, chasing that quiet suburban dream, but they still carried the city's paranoia like a backpack. "Stay off the main road, Tommy," Dad would grumble over his morning coffee. "World's full of crazies." Mom was no better, hovering like a helicopter parent, convinced every scraped knee was a trip to the ER. Fishing bored me to tears, sitting still, waiting for a nibble that never came. Skating? Forget it. I'd end up flat on my ass every time. And all the other kids? They were off at summer camps or splashing around in fancy lake houses, posting envy-inducing pics on whatever social media was hot back then. By mid-July, I'd devoured my pile of Goosebumps books until the spines cracked, rewound our VHS tapes so many times the tracking lines danced like ghosts on the screen, and experimented with melting popsicles in the backyard sun just to watch the colors bleed into the grass. Boredom gnawed at me, a constant itch under my skin, making every day stretch into an eternity of sighs and eye rolls. Dad finally snapped one evening, his newspaper crinkling in frustration. "For Pete's sake, Tommy, go outside and take a damn walk. You're turning 12 soon. Act like it. Find something to occupy that brain of yours before it turns to mush." Mom, always the peacemaker with her soft smile and endless optimism, rummaged through the hall closet and pulled out her old Nikon camera, its strap frayed from years of disuse. "The trails behind St. Peter's Cemetery are gorgeous this time of year," she said, pressing it into my hands. "Snap some pictures for me, sweetie. Who knows, you might discover a hidden talent." I groaned dramatically, flopping back on the couch like they'd just handed down a life sentence. But the next afternoon, staring at the ceiling fan whirring lazily above me, the weight of another empty day crushed my resistance. I slung the camera around my neck, jammed on my faded Red Sox cap to shield my eyes from the relentless sun, and pedaled off into the thick, humid air that clung to my skin like a second shirt. The scent hit me first as I coasted past the wrought iron gates of St. Peter's Cemetery. A mix of damp earth, crumbling stone, and the faint metallic tang of rain on the horizon. The graveyard sprawled out in neat, somber rows, weathered granite headstones etched with forgotten names, wilted flowers drooping in cracked vases, and tattered American flags fluttering half-heartedly from veterans' plots. It was the sort of spot you only really noticed on Memorial Day, when the town paraded through with wreaths and speeches. Beyond the final row of markers, a narrow dirt path snaked into the woods, inviting yet ominous. A crooked wooden sign leaned against a splintered post. "Keep to the trail. Watch for falling limbs." I hesitated for a second, my heart giving a little flutter of unease, but the pull of something, anything, new won out. The forest enveloped me like a living thing, its canopy of maples and oaks interlocking overhead, filtering the sunlight into dappled patterns that danced on the ground. The air grew cooler, heavier, laced with the earthy musk of moss and decaying leaves. It was eerily quiet. No distant rumble of cars, no shouts from neighborhood kids playing stickball. Just the incessant buzz of cicadas drilling into my skull and the occasional caw of a crow slicing through the stillness. I tried to psych myself up, pretending I was some intrepid explorer from National Geographic, camera at the ready for my big scoop. I knelt to photograph a cluster of toadstools sprouting like alien fingers from a rotting log, zoomed in on gnarled roots twisting like veins across the path, and even caught a squirrel mid-pose, its beady eyes locking onto mine with a challenge. For a fleeting moment, a spark of excitement flickered in my chest. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. But then the sky darkened, clouds piling up like angry fists over the treetops. The air thickened with that sharp, ozone-laced smell that screams incoming storm. Thunder grumbled in the distance, low and menacing like a giant clearing its throat. I glanced back, realizing with a sinking stomach that I'd wandered deeper than I'd meant to. The cemetery gates were long out of sight. The rain unleashed like a dam bursting, pounding down in sheets that turned the world into a watery blur. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the forest in stark flashes, and I scrambled for cover under the nearest giant, an ancient oak tree, its trunk as thick as a car, bark rough and furrowed like an old man's face. Huddled there, soaked to the bone, water dripping from my cap's brim, I shivered. Not just from the cold, but from a bone-deep chill that had nothing to do with the weather. That's when I heard it. At first, I dismissed it as the wind howling through the branches, whipping leaves into a frenzy. But no, it sharpened, piercing through the roar of the storm. A woman's voice, raw and desperate, laced with pure terror. "Please, God, no, please!" The plea sliced into me like a knife, freezing my blood. My heart hammered against my ribs, so loud I thought it might give me away. I flattened myself against the trunk. The camera pressed hard against my chest under my drenched shirt, as if it could shield me from whatever horror was unfolding. Footsteps thudded closer, frantic, splashing through mud and puddles, crunching leaves under desperate heels. Then a second voice, deeper, guttural, seething with rage but muffled by the thunder's boom. The woman screamed again, a gut-wrenching wail that ended abruptly in a choked gasp, like the air had been punched out of her lungs. I knew that sound intimately. I'd let out something similar last year when I wiped out on my bike, cracking a rib that left me gasping and crying for hours. Tears stung my eyes, mixing with the rain streaming down my face. My whole body trembled, every nerve on fire. Behind the storm's fury came worse noises, the heavy scrape of something being dragged across the wet ground, the sharp snap of rope being yanked tight, and then the slow, agonizing creak of wood bearing an unbearable weight. It was like the tree itself was groaning in protest. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob, biting down on my knuckles until I tasted blood. Terror clawed at my insides, a primal fear that whispered I was next, that whatever monster lurked on the other side of this oak would sense me, smell my fear. I couldn't see through the downpour, but I didn't need to. In my mind's eye, it was all too vivid, a body swaying limply, twisting in the wind. As quickly as it had erupted, the storm ebbed away. The rain tapered to a drizzle, then nothing, and sunlight pierced the clouds like hesitant fingers. The woods transformed back into something almost peaceful. Birds twittering cheerfully, droplets plinking from leaves like gentle music. But I couldn't move. My legs were jelly, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before I mustered the courage to peek around the trunk. My heart lodged in my throat. Nothing. No body, no rope dangling like a noose, no footprints smeared in the mud, no signs of struggle. Just the ordinary aftermath of a summer squall. glistening foliage and the faint steam rising from the warming earth. Panic surged through me then, hot and urgent. I bolted, crashing through underbrush, branches whipping my face until I burst out into the cemetery. I grabbed my bike, pedaling furiously, tires kicking up gravel. All the way home. Bursting through the door, I slammed it shut, locked myself in my room, and collapsed on the floor. Curled up in a ball, I stared at the ceiling fan's blades whirring endlessly, trying to convince myself it had all been a hallucination born of the storm. But the echoes of that scream lingered in my ears, a phantom ache in my chest. I didn't breathe a word to anyone. Not Dad, with his skeptical eyebrow raise. Not Mom, who'd worry herself sick. Not even my buddies when they trickled back from camp. How could I? Hey, I think I heard a ghost getting murdered. They'd laugh me out of the room, or worse, drag me back there to prove it. No, this nightmare was mine alone, burrowing deeper into my soul with every sleepless night. Weeks dragged on in a haze of exhaustion and dread. Nightmares plagued me, visions of swaying shadows and pleading eyes, leaving me wide-eyed and sweat-soaked before dawn. One restless evening, flipping channels to drown out the silence, I landed on a late-night true crime documentary. I wasn't really paying attention, my mind wandering back to that oak, until the narrator's gravelly voice yanked me upright. In the quiet town near St. Peter's Cemetery, Massachusetts, a string of disappearances that chilled the community to its core. The screen flashed images of those same iron gates, the trail vanishing into the woods. My stomach plummeted, bile rising in my throat. From 1971 to 1973, the voice intoned, 5 young women vanished without a trace, girls aged 9 to 20, snatched during fierce summer storms. The town whispered about a drifter, a local gone mad, but searches turned up nothing for months. Until a hunter's dog trotted home with a severed human hand clamped in its jaws. The trail led straight to the heart of the forest, to that ancient oak. The camera panned to a wide shot. The tree loomed massive and foreboding, its branches like skeletal arms against a stormy sky. They called it the Gravemarker Oak now, a grim moniker for the site where all 5 bodies were discovered, hanging from its limbs like discarded puppets, battered by wind and rain. The last victim, 20-year-old Rachel Collins, had fought hardest. Autopsy photos, blurred for TV, showed a brutal bruise blooming across her chest, ribs fractured beneath. I hurled the remote across the room. It shattered against the floor with a crack that echoed my fracturing sanity. My reflection in the blank screen stared back, ghostly pale, eyes hollow with horror. If I'd been older, maybe I could have rationalized it away. Thunder playing tricks, imagination run wild. But at 12, innocence hadn't fully fledged, and I knew the truth in my bones. I'd heard Rachel's final echoing pleas, a ripple from the past bleeding into my present. After that, I changed. I begged Mom for swimming lessons, throwing myself into the lake's cold depths, battling currents that tried to pull me under. I embraced the water's mysteries, the unseen things lurking below, because they were conquerable, tangible. But the Gravemarker Oak? That shadow stayed with me, a scar on my soul. I never set foot in those woods again, carrying its weight like a secret grave.